"Grandma, call the police. Don't let anyone know it was me." The tiny note slid past my knee just as Tyler, my son, raised his glass for a toast. My daughter-in-law smiled sweetly and poured more water into my glass. I lifted it to my lips and tasted a metallic bitterness curling on my tongue. I had no idea that behind that glass of water lay a secret about to wreck my life. I'm Ruth Ann Delaney, 68 years old, and I've spent my whole life in a small house in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. This home is the result of 45 years of nonstop work by me and my husband, Frank. So many sweltering summers with the A divided by C running around the clock, so many winters with the wood stove lit, pinching every penny to pay off the mortgage. To me, this house isn't just four walls, it's the memories of an entire lifetime. And yet here I am, in our familiar dining room under warm yellow light, holding a trembling note from my 8-year-old granddaughter, Lily. She sat across from me, eyes fixed on her plate, her small hands shaking around her fork. She had just saved me, or at least tried. Tyler, my only son, was pouring red wine into Frank's glass. His voice rang out, "I think it's time we talked about the family's future, Mom." "The future?" I looked straight at him, trying to stay calm while my heart pounded. Brooke, his wife, set her glass down, took his hand, and said in a syrupy voice, "We just want what's best for you and for Dad Frank, too. You're both getting old, and this house is too big to keep up much longer. It would make more sense to transfer it to us. Think of it as an early inheritance." I clenched the note inside my sleeve, careful not to show any reaction. The water in the glass in front of me still gave off that faint, unpleasant smell. I'd taken the first sip and noticed something off. Now Lily's note confirmed my fear. Frank looked up, surprised. "What's wrong with this house? I still mow the lawn every week, and Ruth keeps everything spotless." Tyler gave a strained smile, then dodged. "Dad, shouldn't we plan ahead? Transfer papers, future health care. I know an attorney who specializes in family assets and can make everything neat and tidy." I swallowed hard. "Your attorney. Not mine. Not an independent one." It all felt carefully planned. Brooke cut in. "Actually, Ruth, I already reached out to a well-known geriatric doctor. He can evaluate your mental health, just to be sure everything's fine." "Totally routine." I forced a smile. In my head, loose pieces started to click together. They talked about the future, transfer, mental evaluation. All of it pointed to one goal: turn me into an incapacitated old woman so they could control the house and the money. I looked at Lily. She glanced up for a split second, eyes full of fear, then dropped her gaze. I knew she had seen something. I knew she was trying to save me while her parents, my own son and daughter-in-law, were running a scheme at my table. I set my fork down like nothing was wrong, dabbed my mouth with a napkin, and said softly, "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." In the bathroom, I turned on the faucet, rinsed my mouth hard, and spat into the sink. I opened a contact lens case in my purse and carefully dripped the leftover water from my mouth into it. I snapped it shut and hid it at the bottom of my bag. A piece of evidence. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back had neatly kept gray hair and clear eyes, but something was different, a slight tremble at the corner of my mouth. I whispered to myself, "Be strong, Ruth. Don't tip your hand." Back at the table, I sat down and acted like nothing had happened. Brooke smiled and went to pour more water into my glass. I put my hand over it and stopped her. "Thanks, but I think I've had enough." Her smile faltered, then slid back into place. Tyler picked up his speech again about the benefits of planning early, about how sensible it is for older folks to pass assets to the next generation. I nodded as if I were considering it. Meanwhile, every word landed in my ears like a stone. Frank still believed in our son's good intentions. He nodded absently and said we should probably plan a little. Under the table, I squeezed his hand hard. He turned to me, saw the worry on my face, and fell silent. I took a few more bites of chicken, pretending not to notice. But my mind was racing. Lily had risked slipping me that note. She must have seen them do something to the food or the drinks, or overheard their plan. I couldn't let her courage be wasted. As the meal was ending, Tyler suddenly said, "Next week, Mom, can you come with me to see Dr. Harold Benton? He's very reputable." Just a simple evaluation. I gave the gentlest smile I could manage. "Oh, if you think so, I'll consider it. But for today, let me enjoy a family meal." Brooke shot a quick look at her husband, then back at me, a flash of caution in her eyes. They didn't fully buy that I was fooled. That didn't matter. I just needed them to think I was weak and naive. That was the only way to lead them into their own trap. Frank got up to grab dessert while I stayed seated, watching Lily. She looked up, her big eyes pleading. I gave a tiny nod as if to say, "I understand." Inside me, a resolve rose. They wanted me to be a confused old woman? Fine, I'd play the part. But I would remember every word, every detail, every piece of proof. That night, after we cleaned up, I tucked the lens case with the water sample into a locked cabinet. Frank asked, "You seem tired. Is something wrong?" I smiled and rested my hand on his shoulder. "Just a little headache. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. For now, get some sleep." He kissed my forehead and went to bed. I stayed in the living room, the warm lamp casting a long shadow across the wall. I unfolded the note again and read Lily's shaky words over and over. "Grandma, call the police. Don't let anyone know it was me." An 8-year-old was that brave. I, a woman pushing 70, who'd weathered a lifetime, couldn't let her fight alone. I drew a deep breath and closed my eyes. This battle was only beginning. The next morning, I woke as sunlight slipped through the cream curtains. Frank was still snoring softly beside me, his face peaceful. I sat up and looked around our familiar room, every family photo on the wall, proof of a lifetime of sacrifice. And yet now, the very people I raised wanted to take it all. I brewed a strong pot of coffee and poured it into an old chipped mug. The bitterness cleared my head. I replayed every word from the night before. Brooke's narrowed eyes, Tyler's forced smile. They didn't want to help me. They were building a script to turn me into a useless old woman. That noon, I called Tyler and kept my voice light. "Son, I thought about last night. Maybe we should sit down and talk properly about the house. I don't want any misunderstandings in the family." On the other end, his voice brightened like he'd been waiting for this. "I knew you'd understand. Brooke and I will come by tonight and we'll go over everything." I agreed and told Frank to let me do the talking. He studied me but finally nodded. He's gentle, and he believes that if a family talks honestly, any problem can be fixed. I knew better. Faced with greed, nice words are a thin curtain. That evening, when the clock chimed 7, Tyler and Brooke came in carrying a thick stack of papers. Brooke set them neatly on the living room table, sat up straight, and wore an oddly confident look. Tyler tried to act casual, but his hand kept spinning a pen. "This is a preliminary proposal," Brooke began smoothly, like she was selling insurance. "You and Dad transfer the title of this house to us, and in return we'll cover all care costs, medical, medications, hospital if needed. Basically, you don't lose anything. It's just an early inheritance. All very reasonable, legally and emotionally." I picked up the stack and skimmed the tiny print. Gift deed, durable power of attorney, guardianship responsibility. Those cold terms sounded like a sentence on my life. Frank squinted, not quite following. I set the papers down and smiled calmly. "An early inheritance. That's clever. But let me ask, do you think this house is just an asset?" Tyler hesitated, but Brooke jumped in. "Ruth, we have to be realistic. This house is about 3,000 square feet, and it's wasteful for just 2 people. Maintenance, property taxes, utilities, they all add up. You could move to a smaller, easier place." And Lily would have a better future. Isn't that what you've always wanted? I gave a thin smile, my stomach tight. They dragged Lily into it again, using her as a shield for their greed. They forgot I'm the one who bought her notebooks and shoes when they said they were short on cash. They forgot who sat up all night when she had the flu while they were busy elsewhere. I looked my son in the eyes. Tyler, do you remember what this house is? It's where you grew up. Where your daughter cried her first cry. Every brick has your father's sweat in it. I can't treat it like a commodity to sign away. Tyler avoided my gaze, his voice lowering. I know, but you should think about the future. We're having some financial trouble. If we don't fix it, we'll lose everything. Do you want your granddaughter to suffer? I stared at the grown man I once cradled. Now he was pressuring his mother to give up her home to prop up his instability. I asked softly, "What kind of trouble?" "What debts?" Tyler pressed his lips together and dodged. Brooke squeezed his hand and said curtly, "That's not the point. The point is we have a solution. If you sign, everything will be fine." Frank sighed and looked at me. He wanted peace. I didn't. I stood, went to the cabinet, and pulled out an old photo album. On the cover, in my handwriting from 30 years ago, the Delaney family. I opened it Tyler's 10th birthday, the Colorado trip, his wedding day. I set the album on top of Brooke's papers and looked at them both. See this? This is why I won't sign anything. This house holds all of it. If you want a better future for Lily, build it yourselves. Don't strip your parents' memories to buy your own comfort. The air turned heavy. Brooke forced a smile and tried one last pitch. Ruth, I get that you're attached, but you have to be practical. Older people can get emotional. We just want to ease your burden. Trust us. I answered, firm. Trust doesn't come from shoving papers in someone's face. It comes from actions. And today, you lost mine. Tyler clenched the pen, his face flushing. Brooke shot him a look to keep quiet. She gathered the papers and gave a thin laugh. We'll give you more time. Please think it over. No need to make this tense. They left, and the room fell into silence. Frank rubbed his temples and shook his head. I don't understand how they changed like this. Tyler wasn't like this before. I set my hand on his shoulder. When greed leads the way, people do things you wouldn't believe. But I won't let them take everything. That night, I set Lily's note next to the stack of papers. 2 small things, but they weighed like stones on my chest. One was a child's cry for help. The other was a death sentence for my life's memories. I knew this fight wasn't over. It was only the prelude. And I, Ruth Ann Delaney, would have to learn to fight not with fists, but with a clear head, evidence, and the hard-earned wisdom of a woman who's lived nearly 7 decades. I took a deep breath, turned off the light, and let the house settle into its familiar darkness. Inside me, a flame had just been lit. The next Sunday, Tyler and Brooke came again as if nothing had happened. They rang right on time, carrying a box of fancy pastries from a downtown shop, smiling wide. I opened the door with a stiff smile, hiding my guard. Frank welcomed them in, unsuspecting. Dinner went the same as usual. Brooke moved quickly in the kitchen and brought out 2 glass pitchers, one clear with plain water and a pale green one with thin lemon slices floating. You like lemon water, so I made this just for you, she said, voice sweet as honey. I sat down at the table and caught the brief tension in Brooke's eyes as she set the green pitcher right in front of me. Tyler glanced over, then pretended to ask Frank about the weather. I picked up my glass and poured a little from the green pitcher. The moment I took a sip, a faint bitterness crept over my tongue. Not lemon. Not a hint of salt. It was the taste of deceit. My heart slowed for a few seconds. I set the glass down and pretended to dab my mouth with a napkin. My eyes met Lily's. She sat across from me, her fork tapping lightly on the plate like a signal. I gave the slightest nod to steady her. All through the meal, Tyler kept checking on me with leading questions. "Mom, do you remember what we talked about last time about the future?" Or, "Mom, have you been misplacing things around the house lately?" I smiled and answered vaguely. On the outside, I was a slightly forgetful older mom. On the inside, I was carving every detail into memory. Frank ate contentedly, unaware that my glass was nothing like the one in his hand. Brooke skillfully poured for everyone from the clear pitcher, only I got the special green one. Once, Frank reached for it by accident, and Brooke switched in a flash. "That's for Ruth only, I'll pour you the regular." I wanted to shout, to flip the table and confront them, but I knew it wasn't time. I needed evidence. I needed the truth laid out so clearly no one could deny it. After the meal, I faked a yawn and said I was tired. Tyler jumped in. "See, Mom? You've been worn out more lately. I think that appointment with Dr. Benton is really important." Frank frowned. "Everyone gets tired at any age." But Tyler ignored him and turned to me. "Mom, please say yes. It's just a checkup, nothing more." I gave a small nod, my voice faint. "Okay, I'll think about it." When they left, I quickly gathered my glass, wrapped it in foil, and hid it in the kitchen cabinet. My heart was pounding. I didn't want Frank to worry, but he had already stepped out to trim the rose bushes. I took the chance to jot everything down: date, time, who was present, odd behaviors, strange tastes. That night I lay awake. The image of Lily bowing her head quietly wouldn't leave me. An 8-year-old shouldn't know this kind of fear. She should only be thinking about dolls, homework, and field trips. Instead, she had to watch her parents scheme to poison her grandmother. I told myself, "Ruth, you don't get to fall apart, not just for you, for Lily." The next week it happened again. Brooke brought the special water just for me. This time, I only touched the glass to my lips, let it brush my tongue, then set it down. I smiled. "Tastes good, thanks, honey." Meanwhile, I secretly used a spoon to skim a little and poured it into a small glass vial hidden in my pocket. Quick and clean, no one would notice. After the meal, I pretended to be confused, asking the same things again. Tyler and Brooke exchanged looks, a faint smile flickering. I wanted them to believe I was slipping so they'd push harder. The harder they pushed, the easier it would be to collect proof. Frank started to worry. That evening he asked, "Ruth, are you okay? You asked the same question 3 times today." I held his hand. "Do you trust me?" "Of course. But I'm scared." "Let them think that for now. I need more time." He looked at me, silent, then nodded. Trust shone in his eyes. I knew I wasn't alone. The next day, while I was tidying the kitchen, I heard Lily whisper from the porch, "Grandma." I stepped out and saw her standing there, eyes red. She whispered, "I saw my mom put something in the water pitcher. I'm really scared." I bent down and hugged her tight. "It's okay, Lily. You've done the bravest thing. I'll protect you." She nodded and hurried back to the car when Brooke called out. I watched her go, my chest tight. I swore I wouldn't let them hurt this child. That evening, I took out the 2 glasses I'd saved. Under the kitchen light, I could see a thin residue at the bottom, almost clear but strange. I took photos, filed them, and wrote a detailed journal entry. Sitting alone, I suddenly remembered when Tyler was little, toddling around the yard, laughing out loud. I once dreamed he'd grow up kind and family-loving. The man in front of me now felt like a stranger. Did I fail in raising him, or did greed turn him into someone else? I wiped my tears and breathed deep. I wasn't allowed to be soft. If I collapsed, they'd win. If I stayed silent, Lily would think courage is pointless. I couldn't let that happen. Late at night, after Frank fell asleep, I stepped onto the porch. The Texas sky glittered with stars, and the breeze carried the smell of fresh-cut grass. I closed my eyes and let myself settle. I remembered my mother's words. "Sweetheart, sometimes silence is the strongest weapon. Wait for the right moment, you'll know when to speak. I knew that moment hadn't come, but it was close, very close. That's when I decided I needed an ally who understood the law and this kind of game. I couldn't face a carefully planned scheme alone. But until I found that ally, I had to keep my role flawless. A forgetful, easily led old woman. They wanted me to drink their bitter water? I'd drink it, but I'd save. Every drop. They wanted me to forget? I'd pretend to forget, but in my mind, every detail would be razor sharp. I went back to bed and lay beside Frank. He shifted and wrapped his arm around me in sleep. I listened to his heartbeat and promised myself, I'll protect him, protect Lily, and protect this home even if I have to fight with every clear thought I have left. The quiet war had begun, and I knew each bitter glass would be the evidence I'd use to defeat them. One weekday morning while I was working in the backyard, Tyler called. He tried to sound casual, but there was an edge. "Mom, I got us an appointment with Dr. Harold Benton. He's famous top geriatric specialist. This Friday afternoon, come with me, okay?" Just a simple evaluation. I froze, pruning shears still in my hand. The roses glowed in the sun, but inside me everything turned slate gray. I took a long breath and kept my voice even. "All right, I'll make arrangements." I knew this was the next step in their plan, and I was ready to step onto their chessboard. On Friday morning, Brooke drove me and Tyler to a clinic in a fancy downtown building. A polished brass plaque outside read, "Dr. Harold Benton, Geriatrics Specialist." The hallway was thickly carpeted, with a faint scent of peppermint oil. I looked around, everything designed to make patients feel safe. We were led into a large room, walls covered with framed awards and certificates. Dr. Benton appeared tall, neatly combed silver hair, warm and slow voice. He shook my hand with a kindly smile, then flicked a quick glance at Tyler and Brooke. I caught that quiet look of familiarity. "Mrs. Delaney," he said, "today we'll do a few small tests, just to check memory and attention. Won't take long." I nodded and sat across from him. Tyler set his bag down and readied his phone. Brooke sat close, hands clasped, eyes full of expectation. Dr. Benton started with simple questions. "What's today's date? What month? Do you remember what year it is?" I answered clearly, but intentionally got one weekday wrong. Tyler jumped in. "See? I told you, Mom, mixes up days and times." I gave a sheepish smile. Maybe I got it mixed up. He moved on to short memory tests. He read 3 simple words, pencil, clock, apple, and asked me to repeat them a few minutes later. I repeated them exactly, then forgot one the next time. Brooke sighed, squeezing Tyler's hand, pretending concern. "Doctor," she said, "she's been like this for months. Sometimes she remembers, sometimes she doesn't. We're really worried." Frank came along that day, sitting quietly in the corner. He lifted his head, voice steady. "At home, Ruth handles everything. Cooking, tidying, paying bills, nothing about her is confused." Dr. Benton turned to Frank, smiled politely, and cut him off. People who live together often miss gradual decline. Sometimes love makes us overlook clear signs. I stayed silent, hands resting on my lap, the tiny recorder Monica gave me hidden in my pocket. Every word, every sigh was being captured. The doctor kept going. "Do you often feel tired, misplace items, or suspect family members of taking things?" I pretended to think, then answered softly, Sometimes I forget where I put my keys. As for suspecting anyone, I'm not sure." Tyler jumped right in. "Exactly. Once she said her checkbook was missing and blamed us. She'd just hidden it too well and forgot." I looked at my son with damp eyes to sell the weakness. Inside, my heart was a fireball. "At the end, doctor, Benton scribbled notes and said, "I'll compile the results and can prepare a medical report. That report would be helpful if the family needs legal support for long-term care." Those words cut like a blade. Legal support was the key for Tyler and Brooke to seize control of assets. I smiled blankly and asked, "What does legal mean? Doctor?" He smiled kindly. "Just procedures to ensure your best interests." I nodded as if I didn't understand, but in my pocket, the recorder had kept every word. Outside the clinic, Brooke took my arm, voice sweet. "See, Mom? Easy, right? I think we should take a few more steps to be sure you're cared for." I smiled and murmured, "All right, you two handle it." Tyler drove home looking satisfied. Frank sat beside me and gently squeezed my hand. I knew he'd heard and understood, but it wasn't the moment to speak. Back home, I went to my room and locked the door. I replayed the recording. Benton's voice was clear. "Prepare a medical report, helpful for legal purposes." I wrote down the date and time and saved a copy to the clean phone Monica had set up. I sat in the chair, my hands trembling not from fear, but from seeing how carefully they'd staged this. From the bitter water to the top doctor, every piece was a chess move they planned. They didn't know I was playing too. That night, I told Frank everything. He went still, gripping my hand, eyes reddening. "I can't believe our son would go this far." I cupped his cheek and said firmly, "Frank, we don't have a choice anymore. If we stay quiet, they take it all. If we fight back, at least the truth stays ours." He nodded and held my hand tighter. And I knew from that moment on, we would walk into this battle together, however long and hard it would be. The next day, I met with Monica. I brought the recording and described the entire exam in detail. Monica listened, eyes sharp as a blade, then said, "Exactly what I expected. They're building a file to petition for guardianship, but now we have evidence. The doctor is biased and even brought up legal procedures on his own. That's a dangerous sign, but also an opening to strike back." I exhaled, seeing a faint glimmer of hope. I had stepped into their trap, but at the same time I'd set one for them. That night, I sat by the window and looked out at the rose garden. Moonlight fell like silver over the petals, a reminder to be patient and steady. I thought of Lily, of her pleading eyes asking me to believe her. I thought of Frank, of his calloused hands after so many years of work. I knew I had to see this through, and I knew Doctor. Benton wasn't the last link in this chain, but at least I had a first piece of evidence to use against them. A vow rose in me. They want to paint me as confused. I'll show them just how sharp a mother's memory can be. Monica didn't keep me waiting. The next morning, she called and asked me to swing by her small office in the Austin suburbs. The old red brick building had a modest sign out front. "Monica Alvarez, private investigator." Inside, the air smelled faintly of fresh coffee. Maps, notes, and photos covered the walls. I sat on a wooden chair, feeling both unfamiliar and safe. Monica carried a calm presence, her deep brown eyes like they could see through layers of lies. "I listened to your recording," she said firmly. "It's enough to show Dr. Benton isn't neutral, but we need more. If Tyler and Brooke file for guardianship, the court will demand proof you're not competent. They'll bring video, a fake medical report, and witnesses." I nodded, my heart pinching at the word guardianship. The thought of losing control over my own life still made me shudder. Monica went on, "The key is flipping the board. We have to show they're staging it. I want to plant audio devices in your home right where they usually sit. If they say anything incriminating, we'll have it." I was quiet for a moment, then smiled slightly. "I've been waiting to hear that. I'm ready." That afternoon, Monica, Frank, and I prepped in silence. She brought 3 tiny recorders, no bigger than a thumb, that could be mounted under a table, behind a cabinet, or inside a dummy outlet. Handy as ever, Frank helped. Hide them in the dining room, living room, and hallway. While we worked, Monica looked at me with both admiration and resolve. "Mrs. Delaney, not everyone your age would dare do this. Remember, the calmer you are, the sloppier they'll get." I gave a thin smile. "I've played the confused old lady long enough. Let's see who's really losing their mind." Frank squeezed my hand without a word, and I felt his strength flow into me. The plan was this. On Sunday, Tyler and Brooke would show up like everything was normal. They'd do the same routine, bring food, talk sweetly, then quietly try to get me to drink that bitter water. This time, Monica would be close by, in a car down the street, ready if I signaled. I still had a tremor of nerves, but I could feel my blood heating. I knew I was walking a tightrope. One misstep and I'd fall into their hands. But now I had more than Frank behind me. I had a real ally. Late that night, after Frank slept, I wrote in my journal. My pen shook, but each word was clear. "If tomorrow I'm no longer clear-headed, remember that I fought. Tyler isn't the boy who once called me hero mom. Brooke was never truly my daughter. But Lily is still the light. For her, I'm not allowed to fall." I closed the journal and told myself, tomorrow, the game truly begins. Sunday came with a low Texas sky, heavy clouds like an omen. I set the table with my white china, the set I only bring out for special occasions. Frank stood on the porch pretending to read the paper, really keeping watch. Right at 11:30, Tyler and Brooke arrived. They carried a basket of food, the smell of roast chicken and mashed potatoes filling the house. Brooke kissed my cheek, her sweetness dripping with artifice. "You look much better than last week," she said. I smiled gently and murmured, "Thanks to you two, caring so much." Inside, I felt sick at how sweet my own voice sounded. But I knew I had to play the part. When they sat down, Lily came in behind them, her face bright but her eyes still shadowed with worry. She glanced at me, as if to ask, "Is everything okay?" I smiled and nodded, hoping she'd understand I was ready. As Tyler poured water, I noticed the same habit, 2 separate pitchers. He held a gleaming silver one and poured only into my glass. Brooke shot him a quick look, discreet, but enough for me to see they were in on it together. I lifted my glass and took a tiny sip. The familiar bitterness crawled across my tongue, and a chill ran through me. I made a small face and set the glass down, murmuring, "I guess herbal tea isn't for me." Brooke laughed. "Oh, you're just too sensitive." I looked straight into her eyes but kept that soft smile. Under the table, the recorder was catching every word. Throughout the meal, I let myself seem distracted, asking the same questions again. "What day is it today?" "Oh, I forgot. Who made this dish?" Tyler and Brooke shared pleased looks. Frank stayed silent, but I knew he was gritting his teeth. And Monica surely in the car outside, headphones on listening to every sound. After dessert, Brooke set a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, we think it's time to seriously talk about the future. Some things are better prepared early." I tilted my head and spoke slowly. "You mean a nursing home?" Both Tyler and Brooke answered together. "Not a nursing home, Mom, a specialized care center." I nodded, feigning confusion. "And what happens to the house?" Tyler cleared his throat. "We'll handle it. Sell the house to cover the costs. You won't have to worry about a thing." My chest tightened, but on the outside I just gave a small smile. "You two are so thoughtful." When they were getting ready to leave, I walked them to the door and gave Lily's hand a quick squeeze. She looked up at me, eyes bright, and I knew she understood something important had just been recorded. With the door closed, I sank into a chair. Frank came over and hugged me tight. "Ruth, you acted so well I almost believed it." I smiled, eyes stinging. "It's not acting, Frank. It's surviving." Outside, the Texas sky began to clear, sunlight peeking through. I felt a small light inside me, too faint but real, because today I wasn't alone. I had Monica, I had Frank, I had Lily, and most importantly, I had the first proof of a truth they'd tried to hide. After that Sunday lunch, once Tyler and Brooke had gone, Frank and I sat in the living room. The house was quiet, but the smell of roast chicken lingered along with a faint, bitter scent from the glass I hadn't finished. I looked down and saw a pale white ring at the bottom. My heart lurched. This was the key. Carefully, I carried the glass to the kitchen, rinsed the oily rim under the faucet, then used a spoon to scrape the residue into a clear plastic bag. Frank stood behind me, tense. "Are you sure that's enough?" I nodded. "A little is enough to prove it." That night, I called Monica. She listened in silence, then said briskly, "Take the sample to an independent lab. I'll arrange a trusted analyst. You need results as soon as possible before they push out Benton's report." The next morning, Frank and I drove to a modest building in an industrial area on the south side of town. The sign out front read, "Austin Independent Forensic Lab." Inside, white neon lights shone on spotless tile. The chill of the place made me clutch the bag like it was precious. A silver-haired woman in a white coat greeted us. "I'm Dr. Lorraine. We often work with attorneys in civil disputes. Rest assured, everything here is strictly confidential." I set the bag on the table, my voice a little shaky. "Please test this. I think there's a drug in it." Lorraine pulled on gloves, held the sample under a light, then nodded. "We'll run gas chromatography and mass spectrometry. If there's a sedative or sleep aid, we'll find it." We signed the forms and paid in cash. She said, "You'll have a preliminary result in 48 hours. Leaving the lab, I felt lighter and more afraid at the same time. Tyler and Brooke were surely moving to the next step. I didn't have much time. That night, I tossed and turned, haunted by the bitterness on my tongue. That thin, chalky taste clung like a ghost. I saw Brooke's sweet smile and the silver pitcher tilting over my glass. I saw Tyler's sideways glance, the two of them performing a play where I was the only one not allowed to see the script. In the dark, Frank found my hand. "We'll get through this," he whispered. "Trust me." 2 days later, I went back to the lab. Lorraine handed me a thick envelope, her eyes steady, her voice firm. "The residue contains a high level of zolpidem, a strong sleep medication. Repeated doses cause confusion, short-term memory loss, even hallucinations. At your age, the effects are even more severe." My head hummed. Every suspicion was now ink on paper. Lorraine rested a hand on my shoulder. "This report has legal standing. If needed, I'll testify." I clutched the envelope to my chest, trembling with both fear and pride. They wanted to make me the confused one, but the smell of that sleeping pill in my glass had become proof that I was clear-headed enough to expose their scam. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope again. The clinical words were cold, but to me they read like a declaration. I heard Tyler's voice. "Mom, have you forgotten again? You're always mixing things up." I heard Brooke's thin laugh. "That's how older people are, Mom." I gripped the report and whispered, "No, I never forgot. And you'll remember this for the rest of your lives." Frank sat beside me, his hand trembling as he rested it on my back. "We've got evidence now, Ruth. Time to let Monica know." I nodded, but deep down I knew. This was only the beginning. Tyler and Brooke wouldn't give up easily. I had to brace for a bigger fight. That evening, Monica came over. I spread the results on the table. She read carefully, eyes lighting up. "Perfect. This is the piece we needed. The sleep medication matches the symptoms they tried to manufacture. Now there's one step left. Record them admitting it." I sighed. "Can we really get that? They're careful." Monica's smile turned cool. "Everyone slips when they think they're winning. Be patient. We'll make them expose themselves." Late that night, after the house went quiet, I opened the cabinet and placed the report in a hidden compartment where I keep my most precious things: my wedding ring, our wedding photo, and a small handwritten notebook. I sat down and wrote one more line. Today I learned for sure they put a sleeping drug in my water. But I'm still clear, I still remember, and I won't let this truth be buried. When I closed the journal, I looked up at the window. Outside, the Texas night was quiet, the wind lightly stirring the old oak branches. I promised myself, from now on, every passing breeze will remind me never to forget, protect myself, and protect Lily. The next Sunday, the Texas sky was unusually clear. Sunlight poured down, making my rose garden shimmer like a painting. But inside me, an undercurrent was rising. This was not an ordinary day. This was the day Monica and I would cast our net. Early that morning, Frank helped me set the table. A crisp white tablecloth, blue-rimmed china, and crystal glasses glittering in the light. I wanted everything to look calm, like a warm family meal, but beneath it was a meticulous plan. Monica arrived early, disguised as a phone maintenance tech, carrying a tool bag. Quick and efficient, she placed another recorder under the dining table and hid a tiny camera in a potted plant by the wall. I looked at her, my heart swelling with gratitude. I had never felt so protected. "Just act like you always do," Monica instructed, steady and firm. "Let them think you're weak and confused. Their confidence will make them sloppy." I nodded, my heart pounding. Right at noon, Tyler and Brooke showed up like the model couple. They brought a tray of food. The smell of grilled beef filled the house. Lily followed, her eyes shining, though I could still see a hint of worry there. I gave a small nod as if to say, "We're okay, sweetheart." Brooke laid out the food quickly, her gentle smile a little too perfect, like a mask. Tyler poured drinks, keeping his old habit. One pitcher for everyone, and a shiny silver pitcher for my glass only. I deliberately tracked his hand and asked, "Tyler, why are you using two different pitchers?" He froze for half a second, then forced a smile. One filtered, one regular, Mom. You're sensitive to the tap water smell." I feigned a shy smile, but inside I put another red checkmark in my plan. We started eating. I let myself seem spacey, sometimes repeating questions. "What day is it today?" Or, "Did you make this, Brooke?" Each time, Brooke glanced at Tyler with a satisfied look. They believed I was truly slipping. When dessert came out, Tyler placed his hand on the table and put on a syrupy tone. "Mom, we've thought about this a lot. Your condition is getting more obvious. Maybe it's time to consider a specialized care center." Brooke followed softly. "There, you'd have doctors watching over you around the clock. We'd all feel better. As for this house, we'll handle it, sell it to cover the costs. You won't need to worry." My heart tightened, but on the surface I let my voice tremble. "This house? Sell it?" "But the memories." Tyler took my hand, eyes like a predator hidden under a mild face. "Mom, it's just four walls. What matters is keeping you safe." Right then, I leaned back and sighed. Maybe you're right. But lately something's been strange. Every time I drink water at this table, I feel heavy, foggy. "What do you two think that is?" The room froze. Brooke rushed a laugh, her voice tight. "Oh, you're just sensitive." "It's probably your age." I turned my glass in my hand and deliberately stared at the silver pitcher. Strange. Only the water from this pitcher tastes bitter. "Frank, do you notice it?" Frank looked up, eyes serious. "Yes, I've seen you make a face after you drink." Tyler cut in fast. "That's just in Mom's head. We only want her healthy." I stayed quiet for a few seconds, then nodded lightly. In my head, maybe. But inside, I knew every word had just been captured. After the meal, while everyone still sat at the table, Brooke dropped a line that chilled me. "If Mom keeps going like this, just a few more times and Dr. Benton will have enough to conclude. Then Mom will be legally protected." I looked up, playing dumb. Protected? What does that mean? Tyler smiled weakly. Just paperwork, Mom. So we can manage everything for you. In that moment, I knew the trap had snapped shut. They didn't realize they'd just confessed. Lily, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly spoke, voice shaky but firm. I heard it. Last week, Mom told Dad they needed to give Grandma medicine so she'd get more confused. Don't say I made it up. The table went dead quiet. Brooke went pale. Tyler snapped, Lily, don't talk nonsense. You don't understand anything. But I looked at my granddaughter and smiled with pride. In those clear eyes, I saw the courage I was clinging to. When Tyler and Brooke scrambled to clean up and leave, I stood still, watching the door close. In my pocket, the recorder's tiny red light still blinked. The net had been pulled in, and the fish were beached. Frank wrapped his arm around my shoulders. Ruth, you did so well. I've never seen you this strong. I looked up at him, my voice tight. Not for me, Frank. For Lily. She risked herself to save us. Now it's our turn to protect her. On the porch, the afternoon sun stretched long shadows from the oak. I knew the battle wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt the scale tipping my way. I thought Tyler and Brooke might get cautious after that Sunday meal, maybe even back off a bit. But just 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived at the house, embossed with the seal of a downtown Austin law firm. Frank brought it in, set it in front of me, worry in his eyes. Ruth, brace yourself. Looks like they've started. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a formal notice. Tyler and Brooke were filing for emergency guardianship, claiming I had cognitive decline and could no longer make my own financial or medical decisions. They listed their evidence, the video of me pretending to be confused, and a preliminary report from Dr. Benton. Reading it, I felt blood rush to my face. Each word was a blade. Cognitive decline? I still remember every number, every face in my life. I even remember the smell of the sleeping pill in the water they poured. Yet on paper, they'd turned me into a helpless paranoid. Frank set his hand on my shoulder, voice low. This is when we strike back. That afternoon, I met Monica at her small office. She read the letter and gave a cold smile. Exactly as predicted. They think you're weak enough to corner, but really, they're stepping onto a dangerous line. Monica pulled a small black USB drive from her pocket. Here's Sunday's recording. Brooke mentions giving medicine so Mom gets more confused. Combined with the lab's sleep meta-analysis, we've got a spear in hand. Now we just pick the right moment to drive it home. I gripped the USB, shaking but fired up. I'd spent a lifetime avoiding conflict, wanting peace at home. Now I had to fight like a soldier. 2 days later, we were called to the first hearing at the county courthouse. Wide halls, high ceilings, long wooden benches, it felt sacred and cold all at once. Tyler and Brooke were already there, dressed neatly, faces set like dutiful children worried about their mother. When their eyes met mine, the pretense slipped for an instant, and I saw the icy hate underneath. I didn't look away. I told myself, you chose this road. I'll see it through. The hearing opened, and their attorney stood up, going on about my clear cognitive decline, citing the video, the medical report, and Brooke's observations. Each word landed like a hammer, painting me as a confused old burden. Frank sat beside me, his hands laced and shaking with anger, but he stayed silent. I laid my hand over his and gave a small shake of my head. We had to stay calm. When it was our turn, my lawyer, the one Monica recommended, stood. He said clearly, Your Honor, what they've presented is a facade. The real evidence shows Mrs. Ruth Delaney is fully competent. More importantly, these adult children are scheming to take her assets. He placed 3 files on the table: the independent lab report, the dining room recording, and Dr. Lorraine's prepared testimony. The room's energy shifted. Tyler and Brooke sat up straight, faces tight. When the court allowed the audio to be played, the room went silent. Brooke's voice came through clear, sweet, and vicious. "Just a few more times and Dr. Benton will have enough to conclude. Then Mom will be legally protected." The phrase, "give her medicine so she gets more confused," sliced through their lies like a blade. I saw Brooke go paper white. Tyler clenched his jaw and slapped his thigh. In that moment, I knew the line had blown open. There was no going back for them. The judge stared at the two of them, voice low. "Do you have any explanation for this recording?" Brooke stammered. Tyler tried a weak smile. "It was just kidding around at dinner, Your Honor. We meant memory supplements." A short, derisive laugh escaped Monica's side, and she quickly covered her mouth. The judge frowned, but his eyes shifted back to me. "Mrs. Delaney?" he asked. "Can you speak for yourself about your condition?" I stood up, back straight, voice clear. "Your Honor, I'm 66 years old. I still remember every detail of my life, from the day I married Frank to the day Lily was born. I still do the grocery shopping, cook, and manage expenses. The only thing that has made me confused is the smell of sleeping pills in the water my own son and daughter-in-law gave me. And I have the evidence in my hand." The courtroom buzzed, whispers rising like a wave. Tyler lowered his head, and Brooke trembled, too afraid to look up. The hearing ended without a final decision, but the judge temporarily denied the guardianship petition. We would return within 2 weeks with full evidence. Stepping out of the courthouse, the late afternoon sun hit the stone steps. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest lighten. Frank put his arm around my shoulders and whispered, "You just showed the whole world how strong you are." I looked up at the sky and answered softly, "Not yet, Frank. This is only the beginning. They'll thrash around. And we have to be ready." Inside me, the exploding line had been crossed. Now it was an uncompromising fight to reclaim the truth, our dignity, and the home we built over a lifetime. The 2 weeks waiting for the next court date crawled by like a century. Every morning I walked in my rose garden to keep my mind steady, but I knew Tyler and Brooke were surely plotting a counterattack. They would never give up easily. One afternoon, Monica stopped by with the local paper. On the front page was a headline, "Young couple seeks to protect confused elderly mother." A family tragedy in Austin. Below it were photos of Tyler and Brooke, eyes sad, like two devoted children sacrificing for their mother. I stared at the paper, blood rushing to my face. "They've turned me into a puppet in front of the whole community," I muttered. Monica set her hand on the table, voice firm. "This is when you step into the light. They chose public opinion as a weapon. We'll show the public the truth." A few days later, Monica arranged for me to speak at a community gathering at the local church, where many neighbors and longtime friends meet. I wore a simple navy blue dress and the pearl necklace Frank gave me on our wedding day. When I walked in, many had read the article. Their eyes held a mix of curiosity and pity. I stood on a small wooden platform, took a deep breath, and began, "I know there are rumors about my condition. People are saying I'm confused and can't take care of myself. But I want you to look me in the eye today. I still remember every face in this room and every memory I've shared with you over the past 40 years. The room fell silent. I continued, steady. "What makes me foggy isn't age, it's the sleeping pills slipped into my water, and I have proof." I held up the lab report for all to see. Monica turned on a speaker and played a short recording. Brooke's voice rang out clearly, "Give her medicine so she gets more confused." A wave of whispers swept through. A few old friends stepped closer, their anger turning toward Tyler and Brooke, who were also there, standing in the back, their faces draining as if their masks had been torn off. Tyler stepped forward, trying to keep his voice calm. "Don't believe these lies, it's all staged. My mother is being manipulated." I cut him off, eyes locked on his. "Tyler, I taught you that the truth doesn't need anyone to manipulate it. It stands on its own. And today, it's right here for everyone to see." Applause rose from the older neighbors who've known me all my life. Brooke flushed red and tugged her husband back. After the gathering, I sat in the car with Monica and Frank. My heart still raced, but a new fire had been lit inside me. Monica smiled. "You just won back the public. Next time in court, they won't have the cover of being dutiful children. Now they're the ones under suspicion." I nodded and looked out the window. The Texas sunset burned red like fire, and I saw it clearly. The line had truly exploded. No more halfway. From now on, the battle would be open, fierce, and I had to stand firm to the end. That night, I wrote in my journal, "They want me confused, but I've never been clearer. They want to take my voice, but now the community has heard it. My son betrayed me. My daughter-in-law staged it, but I still have the truth, Frank, Monica, and Lily. And with that, I have enough to keep going." I closed the journal, feeling lighter. The Texas night was quiet, only crickets chirping, but inside me, the fire of resolve burned bright. After the first hearing, I knew this fight no longer lived within our four walls. It had stepped into the public square where there is law, police, doctors, and reports in black ink. I couldn't turn back. On Monday morning, Monica took me to the Travis County Sheriff's Office. The building wasn't large, but its red brick walls and the American flag snapping in the wind felt solemn. I walked in with nerves, but my steps were steady. Inside, the air was cool. Coffee mingled with the rapid clacking of keyboards. A middle-aged officer with a nameplate reading O'Connor greeted us. His eyes were direct, his face trustworthy. "Mrs. Delaney, I've been briefed. Please, have a seat. Tell me everything from the start," I began. The bitter water, the leading questions, the Sunday meal, the recording. When I mentioned Brooke slipping up and saying, "Give her medicine so she gets more confused," O'Connor frowned and scribbled fast. When I handed over Dr. Lorraine's analysis, he looked up, voice firm. "This is significant evidence. We'll open an investigation, but prepare yourself, the process can be intense. Tyler and Brooke will push back hard." I exhaled and answered, "I'm ready. I need the truth out in the open, and I need Tyler's daughter, my granddaughter, out of a dishonest home." Leaving the station, the April sun was harsh, but I felt lighter. I knew I'd laid the first brick in a solid wall against their scheme. The next day, I went to the General Hospital, where Dr. Lorraine had scheduled a full exam. I entered a bright white clinic under fluorescent lights. Dr. Simmons, a salt and pepper-haired man with a steady voice, shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Ruth, I've been briefed on your case. Today we'll run a full workup. Memory, reflexes, health markers. I want a transparent record to protect you in court." I nodded. The tests began. He read me a list of words. Flower, clock, pencil, window. A few minutes later he asked again, and I repeated them exactly. He asked me to draw a clock showing 11:10. I drew it quickly, the circle sure and smooth. Then he gave me a few simple math questions. I didn't miss one. At the end, Simmons looked up and smiled. "You're fully lucid. I'll write a clear report stating there are no signs of dementia. Frankly, you're sharper than many younger patients I've seen." Tears stung my eyes. I never thought I'd live to prove to the world that I'm not crazy, but now each word of that report would be my shield. That afternoon I sat with Monica and Frank in the living room. On the table were 3 files, the lab report, the audio recording, and Dr. Simmons's statement. Monica tapped the table, voice resolute. "With this much, they can't keep fabricating. But I won't rule out them trying to flip the script, maybe bribing another witness or smearing you. We have to stay one step ahead." Frank sighed, but his eyes were bright. "At least this time Ruth has allies. They won't back her into a corner so easily." Looked at my husband, then at Monica, and felt a new confidence rise. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. But that night, when the house was quiet, I sat by the window under the oak's shadow. I knew every step forward was another battle. The police would investigate, the doctors would write, the lawyers would argue, and I knew Tyler and Brooke wouldn't accept defeat easily. I added one more line to my secret journal. Today I filed evidence with the police and have a doctor on my side, but I also know the desperate, driven by greed, thrash hardest. I must be ready for the next explosion. On the day of the formal trial, I walked into the courtroom with shaky legs, but my head held high. The ceiling soared, light poured onto long wooden benches, the seriousness almost suffocating. Shoes echoed on the floor, each step like a drum pushing my heart. Frank walked beside me, his warm hand gripping mine as if to pass me strength. Monica was already seated in the back row, eyes sharp. Across the aisle, Tyler and Brooke appeared calm, but tension flickered in their eyes. They wore dark clothes, posing as dutiful children, but I knew how thin that mask was. The judge, a gray-haired man with a deep, steady voice, called the session to order. Tyler and Brooke's attorney went first, talking at length about an elderly mother no longer lucid. They played the video of me pretending to repeat the same question. A few whispers rippled, a few heads shook. My heart twinged, but I breathed deep and told myself, wait. The truth will come out. When it was our turn, my attorney stood and spoke clearly. Your Honor, these videos show carefully curated moments. We ask to present the real evidence. He submitted the independent forensic report proving high-dose zolpidem sleep medication in my drinking sample. Then he called Dr. Lorraine to the stand. The silver-haired woman stepped up, calm but unwavering. Mrs. Delaney, he asked, can you describe your condition yourself? I stood up, back straight, voice firm. Your Honor, I'm 66. I still remember every detail of my life, from the day I married Frank to the day Lily was born. I still do the grocery shopping, cook, and manage our expenses. The only thing that made me confused was the smell of sleeping pills in the glass of water my own son and daughter-in-law gave me. And I have the evidence, the courtroom murmured, whispers rising like a wave. Tyler dropped his head, and Brooke shook so hard she couldn't look up. The hearing ended with no final ruling, but the judge temporarily denied the guardianship request. We would return within 2 weeks with full evidence. Walking out of court, the late afternoon sun hit the stone steps. I took a deep breath, like a weight lifting off my chest. Frank put his arm around my shoulders and whispered, "You just showed the world how strong you are." I looked up at the sky and said softly, "Not yet, Frank. This is only the beginning. They'll keep fighting. And we have to be ready." Inside me, the breaking point had been crossed. Now it was an uncompromising fight to reclaim the truth, our dignity, and the home we built over a lifetime. Those 2 weeks waiting for the next hearing crawled by like a century. Every morning I walked the rose garden, trying to keep my mind clear, but I knew Tyler and Brooke were planning a counterattack. They never give up easily. One afternoon, Monica stopped by with the local paper. On the front page, a headline read, "Young couple seeks to protect confused elderly mother. A family tragedy in Austin." Below it were photos of Tyler and Brooke, eyes sad, like two devoted children sacrificing for their mother. I stared at the paper, blood rushing to my face. "They turned me into a puppet in front of the community," I muttered. Monica set her hand on the table, voice hard. "This is when you step into the light. They chose public opinion as a weapon. We'll show the public the truth." A few days later, Monica arranged for me to speak at a community gathering at the local church. That's where many neighbors and old friends meet. I wore a simple navy dress and the pearl necklace Frank gave me on our wedding day. When I walked in, many had read the article, eyes mixed with curiosity and pity. I stood on the small wooden platform, took a deep breath, and spoke. "I know there are rumors about my condition. People say I'm confused and can't take care of myself." But I want you to look me in the eye today. I still remember every face in this room, every memory I've shared with you over 40 years. The room went silent. I continued, steady. What makes me foggy isn't age, it's sleeping pills slipped into my water, and I have proof. I held up the lab report so everyone could see. Monica turned on a speaker and played a short recording. Brooke's voice came through, clear. Give her medicine so she gets more confused. A wave of whispers spread. A few old friends stepped closer, anger turning toward Tyler and Brooke, who were there, standing in the back, faces pale as their masks slipped. Tyler stepped forward, trying to stay calm. Don't believe these lies, it's staged. My mother is being coached. I cut him off, eyes locked on him. Tyler, I taught you that the truth doesn't need coaching. It stands on its own. And today, it's right here for everyone to see. Applause rose from the older neighbors who've known me all my life. Brooke flushed and pulled her husband back. After the gathering, I sat in the car with Monica and Frank. My heart pounded, but a new fire had been lit. Monica smiled. You just won back the public. Next time in court, they won't have the dutiful children cover. Now they're under suspicion. I nodded, looking out the window. The Texas sunset burned red like fire, and I saw it clearly. The line had truly been crossed. No more. Halfway. From now on, the fight would be public, fierce, and I had to stand firm to the end. That night, I wrote in my journal, they want me confused, but I've never been clearer. They want to take my voice, but now the community has heard it. My son betrayed me, my daughter-in-law staged it, but I still have the truth, Frank, Monica, and Lily. And with that, I can keep going. I closed the journal, feeling lighter. The Texas night was quiet, only crickets chirping, but inside me, the fire of resolve burned bright. After the first hearing, I knew this battle no longer stayed within four walls. It had stepped into the open where there is law, police, doctors, and clear written reports. I couldn't turn back. On Monday morning, Monica took me to the Travis County Sheriff's Office. The building wasn't large, but the red brick walls and the American flag snapping in the wind felt solemn. I walked in, nerves tight, but my steps steady. Inside, the air was cool coffee and the rapid clack of keyboards. A middle-aged officer named O'Connor greeted us. His eyes were direct, his face trustworthy. Mrs. Delaney, I've been briefed. Please, sit. Tell me everything from the beginning, I began. The bitter water, the leading questions, the Sunday meal, the recording. When I mentioned Brooke slipping and saying, give her medicine so she gets more confused, O'Connor frowned and wrote fast. When I handed over Dr. Lorraine's analysis, he looked up, voice firm. This is significant evidence. We'll open a case, but be ready, the process can be intense. Tyler and Brooke will push back hard. I exhaled and said, I'm ready. I need the truth out there, and I need my granddaughter, Tyler's daughter, out of that dishonesty. Leaving the station, the April sun was sharp, but I felt lighter. I knew I'd set the first brick in a solid wall against their scheme. The next day, I went to the General Hospital, where Dr. Lorraine scheduled a full exam. I entered a bright white clinic under fluorescent lights. Dr. Simmons, a salt-and-pepper-haired man with a steady voice, shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Ruth, I've been briefed. Today we'll test memory, reflexes, and health markers. I want a clear record to protect you in court. I nodded. The tests began. He read, flower, clock, pencil, window. A few minutes later he asked again, and I repeated them exactly. He asked me to draw a clock at 11:10. I drew it quickly, the circle smooth and sure. He gave simple math problems. I missed none. At the end, Simmons smiled. You're fully lucid. I'll write a report stating there are no signs of dementia. Honestly, you're sharper than many younger patients. Tears stung my eyes. I never thought I'd live to prove to the world I'm not crazy, but now every word of that report would be my shield. That afternoon, I sat with Monica and Frank in the living room. On the table were 3 files: the lab report, the audio, and Dr. Simmons's statement. Monica tapped the table, resolute. "With this much, they can't keep spinning lies. But they may try to flip the script, bribe a witness, smear you. We have to stay a step ahead." Frank sighed, eyes bright. "At least this time Ruth has allies. They won't corner her so easily." I looked at my husband, then at Monica, and felt a new confidence rise. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. But that night, with the house quiet, I sat by the window staring at the oak's shadow. I knew every step was a new battle. Police would investigate, doctors would write, lawyers would argue. And I knew Tyler and Brooke wouldn't accept defeat easily. I added one more line to my secret journal. Today I filed evidence with the police and have a doctor on my side, but I also know the desperate thrash hardest. I must be ready for the next blast. On the final trial day, Austin's sky was heavy, gray clouds pressing down. I sat in the courtroom, nerves tight enough to hear every heartbeat. Frank sat close, gripping my hand. Monica behind us, eyes fixed on the bench. Tyler and Brooke walked in pale, eyes dark with circles. They didn't look so confident anymore. The past days, medical reports, the recording, Lily's testimony had cracked the dutiful child mask. The judge struck the gavel, voice even. After reviewing all evidence, witness testimony, and expert reports, the court rules the guardianship petition by Tyler and Brooke Delaney is denied. Mrs. Ruth Delaney is fully competent and has full legal capacity. The room seemed to burst at that moment. I felt my shoulders lighten as if I'd dropped a boulder I'd carried for years. Frank leaned in and whispered, "You did it, Ruth." But the judge wasn't done. He turned to Tyler and Brooke, voice stern. "Based on evidence of harmful conduct, the court grants temporary guardianship of the minor, Lily Delaney, to her grandmother, Mrs. Ruth Delaney, until a long-term family court decision is issued. During this time, the parents may have supervised visitation only." Whispers rippled through the room. I looked at Tyler, rage flared in his eyes while Brooke covered her face with performative tears. I wasn't afraid anymore. This ruling didn't just protect me. It freed Lily from a toxic, deceitful home. That afternoon, when we brought Lily home, she ran into the rose garden, laughing like a bird set free. I stood on the porch, watching her small figure, tears spilling. Frank wrapped an arm around me, warm and steady. "Maybe this is the real reward, Ruth. Not just justice for you, but a childhood for Lily." Lily ran back, hugging me, her voice innocent but strong. "Grandma, I get to stay with you now, right? I don't have to hear things I don't understand anymore." I held her tight and whispered, "That's right, sweetheart. You're safe now, and I'll always be here." The next day, I began something I'd long wanted but never had the calm to do, planting a new garden in the backyard. I chose a patch beside the roses, where morning sun pours in. I wanted a fresh start to sow seeds of trust and healing. Lily trotted behind me with a little shovel. Frank hauled fresh soil, bucket by bucket. We dug holes together and planted lavender, sunflowers, and a few tomatoes Lily insisted on. As we worked, Lily giggled. "Grandma, I'm calling this the Garden of Hope. Every flower will be like a new day for us." I smiled, wiping my brow. "You're right. This garden will remind me that even after the darkest days, flowers still bloom." In the days that followed, the house settled into a warm rhythm. Mornings, I brewed tea, Frank read the paper, and Lily did homework by the window. Afternoons, we tended the new garden. Each time I smelled the damp earth and saw Lily's little hands dirty and happy, my heart filled with gratitude. I was no longer just a woman who'd protected her assets and dignity. I was a real grandmother, responsible for nurturing both a child's heart and childhood. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat in the garden under the moonlight shining on the fresh rose. I thought about the ruling, the temporary guardianship. I knew a long road lay ahead, paperwork, pushback from Tyler and Brooke. but now I wasn't afraid. The law stood with me, and more importantly, love led the way. I wrote one more line in my journal. Today, justice spoke my name. But the greatest joy isn't the win, it's Lily running in the garden, her laughter like bells. Her future is the garden I must tend with all my heart. Outside, a soft night wind rustled the leaves, like a promise. From now on, this home won't be a place of scheming, but of love and hope. 6 months have passed since the court ruling, long enough for wounds to ease, short enough for me to remember every detail, every look, every word that cut deep. I can't and won't forget. Peace doesn't mean forgetting, it means living on with memories etched into your bones. Each morning, I wake as sunlight slips through the window and birds sing in the garden. Lily sits at the kitchen table, brown hair a little messy, mumbling her spelling words. Frank pours my coffee. The aroma blends with damp earth from the new beds. Those small sounds used to seem ordinary, now they're a gift. The garden is thriving. Purple lavender, tall sunflowers, and Lily's tomato row heavy with bright red fruit. She beams. "This is our red feast, Grandma." I laugh, my heart swelling with the simple joy I'd lost for so long. But even in the quiet, I don't forget the bitter months. I still keep my journal. I still fold away the medical report and the recording, not to cling to pain, but to remind myself I stood up and I wasn't broken. I want Lily, when she grows up, to know her grandmother was betrayed but didn't lose faith in justice or in herself. Tyler and Brooke are silent now. The court hasn't made a final decision on long-term custody, but I have temporary guardianship of Lily. She sleeps safely here, plays in the yard, and grows up with me and Frank. That matters more than anything. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this present belongs to us. One afternoon under the oak, I asked Lily, "Do you regret testifying?" She shook her head, eyes shining. "No, Grandma. I told the truth. And the truth is never wrong." Her answer left me quiet. An 8-year-old understood what many adults never admit. I hugged her and whispered, "Peace isn't forgetting, it's learning to live with the truth, sweetheart." I write this now not to reopen wounds, but to share with anyone who's faced betrayal inside their own family. If you're dismissed, doubted, or pushed into a dark corner, remember, there is still light if you hold to your faith. I know many of you listening may have felt belittled by your own children or used, or felt your voice was too small to be heard. Please don't stay silent. Even a trembling voice like Lily's on the stand can turn a courtroom. And before I close, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for sitting with me through each tear-filled mile of this road. Your presence makes my story more than a private wound. It becomes a message to every heart that's been hurt. We are not alone. If this story touched you, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep walking new journeys together. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for staying with me to the very end. Your love and connection are the peaceful garden I'm blessed to keep tending in this life. Right in the middle of my son's funeral, with incense still thick in the air and the wreaths not yet wilted, my daughter-in-law Brianna looked me straight in the eye and said coldly, "Tomorrow you need to get out of this house. This isn't your place anymore." In front of relatives and guests, I swallowed my tears, bit my lip, and chose silence. I didn't want to turn my only son's farewell into a humiliating argument. I only wanted Nathan to rest in peace, at least on his final day. Yet at the will reading afterward, Brianna smirked and sneered, "Hope you enjoy being homeless. Because you're not getting anything." But the moment the lawyer opened the envelope was when karma caught up with her. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Genevieve Hartley, 68 years old, an American mother who's known a lot of loss, but I never imagined grief would hit this hard. My husband died more than 10 years ago from lung cancer, leaving me and our only son, Nathan. After he passed, I sold our old house in the Dallas, Texas suburbs and put $40,000 toward the down payment to help Nathan and his wife, Brianna, buy the home we lived in. Nathan said then, "Mom, think of it as a boost. When you want a smaller place later, I'll help." I trusted my son. And honestly, I didn't worry much about paperwork. When I moved in with them, I tried my best not to be a burden. I cooked dinner, worked in the yard, and picked up my grandchild from school. I cleaned, covered small household expenses, and saw it as my way to keep the family close. But it all became an excuse for Brianna to find my weaknesses and quietly turn me into an outsider in the very house I helped build. Standing before my son's casket that day, my heart hurt so much I thought I might collapse. Nathan died suddenly of a heart attack at 46, with so many plans unfinished. I wanted to pour all my strength into grieving my son and sending him off in peace. Instead of a family's embrace, I got a cold sentence from my own daughter-in-law. Brianna's words cut straight through me, shattering any illusion that I could rely on this family in my old age. I remember every detail. As guests left, the scent of funeral flowers still filled the living room. Used tissues, wet with Brianna's staged tears, were on the table. She wiped her eyes skillfully, always facing the crowd for sympathy, but once no one was watching, her gaze was so cold it made me shiver. I looked again at the wreaths from my late husband's relatives, sent as gestures of support. I knew if they heard what Brianna had just said, they'd be furious. But I kept quiet. I bit my lip until it bled to preserve the last bit of dignity for the family. I wouldn't turn my son's farewell into an open display of hatred. I went upstairs to the small room, Nathan once told me. "Stay as long as you like, Mom. Treat it as your home." I sat on the edge of the bed, tears falling, yet my mind oddly clear. I opened the drawer and took out the small silver key Nathan had given me a few weeks before he died. He'd only said, "Keep this, don't tell anyone. You'll understand later." I'd wondered, but didn't ask. And now, after hearing Brianna throw me out, I began to realize this key was my only hope. I didn't sleep that night. I packed my things into 4 large suitcases and 2 boxes. Each time I folded a shirt, I remembered all the laundry I'd done for the family without a single thank you. Every time I looked at Nathan's bright smile in a photo, my heart broke all over again. I wrapped the remaining pictures in cloth and whispered, "Son, I won't let anyone smear what I've done for you or the love I have for you." Brianna didn't come to see if I needed anything or help me pack. Instead, at exactly 10 p.m., she stood in the doorway, arms crossed, tapping her nails on the frame, and said with contempt, "Don't expect me to change my mind by 10 a.m. Tomorrow, I want you gone. I've put up with you long enough." I looked her in the eye and said nothing. I just nodded. For the first time in my life, I saw such brazen contempt, and for the first time, I resolved never to let anyone trample my dignity again. I left that house before dawn. I took only 4 suitcases in the trunk, a box on the back seat, and Nathan's silver key in my coat pocket. I drove out of the quiet neighborhood while everyone slept. No one knew the woman who'd cared for so many of their children was slipping away like a homeless stranger. I stopped at a roadside motel where a neon vacancy sign threw a cold light over the parking lot. The room was small, smelled of bleach, and the sheets were wrinkled, but I knew this was only temporary. From my purse, I opened the envelope Nathan had bundled with the key. Inside was attorney Harold Pierce's business card and a handwritten note. "Mom, if I'm gone one day, go see Mr. Harold. I've arranged everything." I cried again, but not only from pain. They were a mother's tears on realizing her son had seen it all coming. Nathan knew his wife's true nature and quietly laid out a path for me to survive. I sat by the motel window watching headlights streak past on the highway. A small fire lit in my chest. I wasn't a trembling mother waiting to be thrown out anymore. I was the one holding the key. And I knew the real game had only just begun. The next morning, I drove back to the funeral home where Brianna had arranged everything. Nathan's service was large. White flowers blanketed the room, hymns played steady, and hundreds of well-dressed guests filed in. Everyone praised how solemn and well-organized it was, looking at Brianna with sympathy, seeing her as the young widow who'd lost her husband. I stood off to the side, feeling like a faint shadow at my own son's farewell. I noticed every detail, enlarged photos of Nathan on the walls from childhood to graduation, then the wedding to Brianna, then family vacations. But not a single recent photo of Nathan with me. The pictures I remembered in the living room, me hugging Nathan at his college graduation, the two of us at Thanksgiving with relatives, were gone. In their place were a happy family of 3 shots: Nathan, Brianna, and my grandchild. I stood still, as if erased from my own son's memories. Brianna entered in a long black dress, makeup flawless but seemingly blurred by tears. Her sobs were loud enough for everyone to hear. Whenever someone came to comfort her, she clung to them and cried harder, making people believe grief was crushing her soul. Outsiders would think she was a devoted, faithful widow. But I knew those tears weren't for Nathan. I still remembered the cold look the night before, the contempt in her voice as she threw me out. A few hours apart, yet the images were impossibly different. One Brianna in public, the grieving wife, poster child for loyalty. Another Brianna behind closed doors, ice cold, unafraid to toss out a mother who just lost her son. I walked the hallway, trying to fulfill my duties as the bereaved mother. I greeted Nathan's old friends, neighbors, and co-workers from his architecture firm. They offered the usual comfort. "Life is so unfair. He was so young. You have to stay strong." I nodded and managed weak smiles. But deep down, I felt like I was playing a different role. The quiet, patient mother, while the main stage belonged to Brianna. What made my throat tighten was standing in the receiving line when I heard Brianna whisper to her brother Trent behind a wall of white flowers. Her voice was low, but I heard it clearly. "The life insurance will cover the debt for 2 years. After that, I can manage." And the old woman, a short, harsh laugh then, "We'll get the hint. I'm not obligated to support anyone else." I froze. My hands shook, and my heart pounded like it would burst. For a moment, I felt like a throwaway, a weight to be dumped. In the middle of the funeral, with my son not yet buried, Brianna was calculating money and cutting me out of her life. No more feigned sympathy, no more family unity. The mask slipped in a few sentences. I gripped my purse to hide my trembling hands. I told myself not to make a scene. Not here. Not now. Nathan deserved a dignified farewell, not his mother and wife tearing each other apart in front of everyone. I lifted my head, swallowed the lump in my throat, stepped out of the row of chairs, and quietly found a seat off to the side. Under the funeral home's soft yellow lights, I watched Brianna step up and read a few remembrance lines in a trembling voice. She spoke about a wonderful husband, about future plans cut short, and a pain that won't fade. Guests teared up, patted each other's shoulders, some even praised her strength. I watched, feeling a strange mix: pain, anger, and calm. Calm because only I understood how fake it was, and calm because in my purse I had Nathan's key, proof he wasn't as blind as people thought. The service ended with hugs and "take care of yourself." I caught pitying looks from some of my late husband's relatives, as if I were just an old, lonely mother living on my daughter-in-law's goodwill. They didn't know she'd just taken my home. I forced a smile, thanked them, and left quickly before tears returned. Leaving the room, I saw Brianna in the hallway with Trent. They stood close, whispering, glancing my way. When she noticed me, Brianna pretended to wipe her eyes and leaned on her brother's shoulder. Trent patted her and smirked. In that instant, I understood more clearly than ever. They saw me as a cost, an obstacle to keeping the house and the insurance money. I stepped outside and took a deep breath. The late afternoon sky was gloomy, with a March chill. I pulled my coat tight, hands still closed around the key in my crease pocket. The cold outside was nothing compared to the cold inside me, but in that deepest sorrow, I felt a glimmer of light. I knew I no longer had a place in this family, at least not in Brianna's eyes. But I also knew Nathan hadn't abandoned me. He'd prepared something for me, and this key was proof. That night, I didn't go home, the house I thought would be my final place. I drove straight to the small highway motel I'd rented. Sitting on the worn bedspread, I replayed Brianna's whisper. The insurance will cover the debt. The old woman will get the hint. The words kept looping like a blade. I cried, but not just from loss. It was humiliation, being despised while my son wasn't even in the ground yet. When the tears ran out, I sat up straight and faced the foggy mirror on the wall. I whispered, "Son, I won't let them trample me like this. You wanted me strong, and I will be." I touched the pocket where the key rested. In that moment, I knew. The counterattack would come, and when it did, I wouldn't be the weak old mother they imagined. 2 days after the funeral, my phone rang. Brianna's name lit up the screen. I hesitated, then answered, already certain nothing good would follow. Sure enough, her voice oozed false sweetness. "Genevieve, can you come by the house? I have a few of Nathan's things, keepsakes, that I think you should have." Hearing keepsakes, my chest tightened. I thought of watches Nathan wore or old photo albums he kept in his nightstand. Suspicious, but I agreed, partly to hold on to something of my son, partly because I knew I'd be facing Brianna many more times. When I arrived, the house looked exactly as it did after the funeral. White flowers drooped in vases, and the air was heavy with dampness and leftover candle scent. It had once been Nathan's warm home. Now it felt like a cold stage. Brianna opened the door, face expressionless, no tears left. "Come in," she said, turning. "Straight to the living room." I paused at the threshold, then followed. The oak table in the center was cleared, except for a stack of papers and a pen. There wasn't a single keepsake of my son. I knew instantly. This wasn't about returning mementos. It was a trap. Brianna sat and pointed at the stack. "This is an agreement. If you sign, there won't be any legal disputes over the house. I want things clear. The house is in Nathan's name, which means it's mine. You need to confirm you're leaving voluntarily. No claims, no demands. That way, everything stays smooth." I stared at the pages. The language was icy, carefully drafted, even leaving a spot for notarization later. I felt both pain and anger. I knew I had sold my own house to put in $40,000, so Nathan could buy this one, yet here I was being treated like a stranger, told to sign a promise not to cause trouble. I looked up, my voice trembling slightly. "Brianna, I just lost my son. I haven't even gathered my thoughts. How can you ask me to sign this?" She showed no sympathy. "Because I don't want problems. I'm young, I need to move on. I can't keep dragging an old woman like you around my house. Nathan wouldn't want that either." Her words felt like a blade twisting into my heart. But right then, an idea flashed. I suddenly remembered the mini voice recorder in my purse, the one I used to save lectures when I was still teaching. There was a gap under this oak table, just enough to hide it. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Fine. Hand me the pen." I pretended to tremble as I held it. My fingers slipped slightly, and I intentionally made a small mistake in my signature. To anyone else, I looked panicked, but I knew this. A wrong signature would invalidate the document. Across from me, Brianna's face relaxed, convinced she'd won. "See? This will make things easier for everyone." she said, satisfied. While she was busy putting the papers away, I smoothly bent down to pick up a dropped handkerchief and, at the same time, attached the recorder under the table. I switched it to auto, its tiny light blinking a faint green. My heart pounded, but I kept the same weary, compliant expression. "All done. I'll go now," I said, standing up, my voice unsteady. Brianna gave a thin smile, folding her arms on the chair. "Yes, you should go. I'm tired of supporting someone who can't do anything. She's a parasite and belongs on the street. I'm not a charity to carry extra weight." I turned away, hiding the tear rolling down my cheek, but inside me, something else flared clarity and resolve. The mini recorder had captured every cruel word. That was my first piece of evidence, and I would guard it like a treasure. Leaving the house, I drew a deep breath on the porch. The late March sky was gray, the wind strong enough to make the front yard trees sway. I pulled my coat tight and hurried to the car. When the door slammed shut, I exhaled long, like I'd just escaped a predator's den. I drove back to the motel, heavy-hearted but with a new fire lit inside me. I knew I had nothing left to lose, but I had something Brianna couldn't imagine the truth, and I would let that truth be the rope that binds her. That night, I sat alone in the small room. I took out the recorder and hit play. Brianna's voice rang out clear in the stillness. "She's a parasite and belongs on the street." I listened 3 times, each time feeling both hurt and more determined. I whispered to myself, "Nathan, did you hear that? Your wife's true face is showing, but I won't keep crying. I will stand up, and I'll let the world know you were right to trust me." I put the recorder in the drawer and locked it. The first piece of evidence was in my hands. And I knew this was only the beginning of my counterattack. I returned to the roadside motel room late at night. The red neon vacancy sign outside flickered a cold light through the thin curtain. Inside, the harsh bleach smell clung to the faded sheets, stinging my nose. The small room was bare. A single yellow bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a dim, dreary glow. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching my bag to my chest. Brianna's words from that afternoon still pounded in my head. "She's a parasite and belongs on the street." I didn't need to replay the recording. Every syllable felt carved into my bones. Each time I remembered, it hurt and also sparked a flame. It wasn't just an insult, it was a cold confirmation that she considered me disposable. I leaned back against the wall, eyes half closed. Semi-trucks thundered along the highway outside, mixing with the old air conditioner's rattling hum. In that moment I told myself, I lost my husband, and now my son, but I will not lose my dignity too. Nathan, my only child, saw all of this coming. Proof of that was the silver key and the note he left me, and I knew that was my only path out of Brianna's trap. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the thin curtain, painting blotchy streaks across the mildewed wall. I woke from a nearly sleepless night. My body was exhausted, but my mind was strangely clear. I washed my face with icy water from a rusty tap, then made instant coffee from the vending machine in the lobby. It burned bitter in my throat, but at least it woke me up. I sat at the wobbly wooden table and took out the envelope from Nathan. His familiar handwriting on the note made my hands shake. "Mom, please go see Mr. Harold Pierce." Below were the phone number and the law office address. I traced the letters as if touching Nathan's hand. I sat still the entire morning, a finger resting on the numbers. I didn't call yet, partly because I needed to calm down, and partly because I knew this call would open a new chapter, and once it began, there'd be no going back. I had to be ready, not a weeping, fragile mother, but a woman, prepared to fight for the right to exist. By late afternoon, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered, and a steady, low male voice said, "Hello, I'm Harold Pierce, the attorney handling Nathan Hartley's legal matters. First, please accept my condolences for your loss." I gripped the phone, my throat tight. After a moment I answered, "Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Nathan, my son mentioned you. He trusted you." Harold's voice softened, a steadying anchor. "Yes, Nathan worked with me for some time. Before he passed, he left certain documents and instructed me to contact you. We should set up a meeting to clarify issues related to an addendum to the will. Could you come to my office next Tuesday at 2 p.m.? I nodded, knowing he couldn't see me. "Yes, I'll be there. Thank you." When the call ended, I set the phone down and stared ahead. Fear fluttered in my chest, but so did hope. Nathan hadn't abandoned me. My son had prepared something, left me a path Brianna never expected. I looked up at the smoke-stained ceiling, and it suddenly seemed brighter, as if Nathan's eyes were watching over me. That night, I opened an old notebook and began to write, like speaking to my son. "Nathan, today I got a call from Attorney Pierce. You prepared more for me than I ever imagined. I promise I won't let you down. I'll keep my dignity, and I'll let the world see you were right to believe in me." I folded the notebook and tucked it under my pillow. Outside, cars tore down the highway like racing heartbeats. I knew the day of reckoning was close. 2 days later, my phone rang again. This time, Brianna's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was sugary and strained. "Genevieve, I just want to make sure you're not planning to make trouble for me. We're still family, right? I think you should let things be. Staying quiet is best for everyone. Otherwise, no one will believe you anyway." I drew a long breath, holding back anger. "Brianna, I don't want drama. I only want Nathan to rest in peace. But remember this, I won't let anyone walk over me ever again." A short, mocking laugh crackled through the line. "And what do you think you can do? No one's on your side. People will just see a bitter old woman. You should disappear like you should have from the start." I closed my eyes and said nothing. I let her finish and quietly hung up. Then I opened the drawer and looked at the recorder resting inside. I knew that if needed, I had what I needed to protect myself. In the days that followed, I lived hour by hour. Each morning I put on my old coat and went out for a hot coffee from the convenience store near the motel. I sat in the corner and watched sunlight move across the room. My shaking eased, replaced by steady anticipation. I knew that by next Tuesday, everything would be different. In those quiet moments, I thought of Brianna. She was surely scheming, surely relieved she thought she'd forced me to sign. She didn't know the signature was invalid. She didn't know her cruel words were recorded. And most of all, she had no idea what Nathan had left for me. I looked at the silver key in my hand and squeezed it gently. A new game had begun, and this time I wouldn't be the passive one. The meeting with Attorney Harold Pierce came faster than I expected. All that morning my heart thudded like a drum. I wore a neat old navy dress and a gray cardigan. I wanted to look put together, not to show off, but to make sure Brianna saw I was still Genevieve Hartley, a woman with dignity, not the parasite she called me. The law office was in a 3-story red brick building downtown. When I arrived, the clock read 1:45. I sat in my car a few minutes, breathing deeply to steady myself. Through the window, I saw a silver BMW pull in. It was easy to recognize the woman who stepped out. Brianna, in a fitted black dress, blonde hair neatly curled. Next to her was Trent, her brother, in a crisp suit. I got out. Brianna's eyes met mine and briefly flickered, then hardened. She turned away without a hello. Trent leaned in to whisper to her, and they went inside quickly. I followed with my head high and my hands tight on my purse strap. The receptionist smiled and led us to a carpeted waiting room. It was still and quiet except for the ticking clock. Brianna sat across from me, legs crossed, fists tight on her designer bag. Every time she glanced up, her eyes slashed at me like knives. I stayed calm and even gave a faint smile, which only irritated her more. At exactly 2 p.m., the door opened and Harold Pierce walked in. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, tall and lean, with kind eyes behind silver frames. He greeted each of us, his voice low and steady. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time, but Nathan left very specific wishes. I'll read the will exactly as written." We entered his office, a wide room with a polished mahogany desk and shelves full of files. I sat across from Brianna and Trent, so tense I could barely breathe. Harold began reading. The first part was what I expected: the house, the car, retirement accounts, and the life insurance, everything left to Brianna. She nodded repeatedly, lips curving into a smug smile. Each time Harold said assets left to the wife, she shot me a look full of challenge, as if to say, "See, you're nothing." I sat with my hands folded, silent. I wasn't reacting. I knew the surprise hadn't come yet. Then Harold paused. His tone shifted, slower. However, 3 months before he passed, Nathan added an addendum to the will. I'll read it word for word. The air changed. Brianna stopped nodding and leaned forward, eyes locked on the papers. Trent lowered his pen and stared. My breath grew heavy. Harold continued, quote, "I, Nathan Hartley, leave the entire contents of Safe Deposit Box K412 at First National Bank, along with all related documents and accounts inside, to my mother Genevieve Hartley. Full and exclusive ownership." A dead quiet moment. I could hear my own heartbeat. Brianna slammed her hand on the table. "What? No way. Nathan never mentioned any safe deposit box." Mr. Harold calmly looked up. "Ma'am, I personally witnessed him sign this addendum. He was fully competent. I have medical verification attached." "Nothing improper here." Trent cut in, voice tight. "We demand verification. This could be forged." The attorney didn't flinch. "You're entitled to request it, but remember, this document is lawful and already filed with the county court. If you want to contest it, the process will be lengthy and the outcome uncertain. I advise respecting the decedent's wishes." Brianna's face flushed. She bit her lip. I saw her hand tremble, though she tried to stay composed. She turned to me, eyes blazing. "You knew about this, didn't you?" "You put Nathan up to it!" I shook my head, speaking slowly. "No. I'm as surprised as you are. Nathan never told me about a safe deposit box. But maybe my son knew better than anyone that his mother needed protection." Brianna let out a short, brittle laugh. Trent placed a hand on her shoulder, whispered something, and both fell silent. "Mister." Harold took out a sealed envelope and handed it to me. "These are the box key and the authorization. The bank will proceed once they have the death certificate." "You have full access to the contents." I took it, my hand heavy yet oddly warm. Inside, I told Nathan, "Son, I understand now. You never abandoned me." Brianna's eyes locked on the envelope like she might snatch it. I saw fear there, not just anger. Maybe she knew the box held more than money. Maybe instinct made her panic, because she understood Nathan had seen her true nature. The meeting ended tight as a drawn wire. Brianna shot to her feet, her chair scraping back. With a bang, she yanked Trent's arm and stormed out. But before leaving, she turned, stared me down, and said each word, "Don't think you've won. I won't let this go." The door slammed. Only Harold and I remained. He looked at me with a faint smile. "Mrs. Genevieve, your son was very thorough. He planned for every scenario. Trust that he wanted you protected." I nodded, my throat tight. Tears welled up, but this time they weren't from despair. They were the tears of new strength and faith. Leaving the office, I stepped into the street. The late afternoon was chilly, wind tugging my cardigan. I held the envelope close and walked slowly. People rushed by, traffic flowed, yet I felt oddly comforted. In all this loss, I still had something precious: my son's quiet protection. And now it was the flame guiding me through whatever came with Brianna. I knew this was only the beginning. A small bomb had gone off, and the aftershocks would last. Brianna wouldn't sit still, but I wasn't the compliant mother anymore. I had evidence, a silver key, and most importantly, a reason to fight. Nathan, my son, had given me that faith, and I swore I wouldn't waste it. 3 days after the will reading, I was at First National Bank on a cold morning. The sky was slate gray, the April wind damp and gusty, whipping my hair. I wore a dark brown heavy coat, the envelope and silver key from Mr. Harold Pierce in hand. My heart pounded not from fear, but because I knew the truth Nathan had prepared for me lay beyond that steel door. The bank was busy, heels tapping on the marble floor. I went to the desk and showed my documents. The banker, a middle-aged woman named Peterson, looked up with kind sympathy. "Are you Mrs. Genevieve Hartley? We were expecting you. Please follow me." I nodded and followed her through several security doors. We stopped at a thick gray door with an electronic lock. Miss Peterson scanned her card and used a master key. My hands shook as I pulled the silver key from my pocket and turned the second lock. A click, the door swung open, and we stepped into a large room under fluorescent light. Box K412 sat on the third rack, long and heavy. I needed both hands to pull it. When the cold metal box settled on the table, I hesitated. "Miss." Peterson offered a small smile. "Take as much time as you need. I'll wait outside." The door closed. It was just me and the box. I sat, took a deep breath, and turned the key. Inside, the first thing I saw was a brown envelope labeled, "For Mom." I opened it with shaking hands. Nathan's voice seemed to speak as I read, "Mom, if you're holding this, the thing I feared has happened. I'm sorry I can't protect you by being there, but I've prepared so you'll never be abandoned. You deserve a peaceful life. No one has the right to throw you out on the street." I cried. Tears fell onto the letter, blurring the lines. I quickly wiped them away. I couldn't lose a single word he left me. Beneath the letter was a thick stack of documents, organized neatly. I opened them: bank statements, investment agreements, stock sheets. It took a few seconds to understand the numbers: nearly $200,000, all in my name. Nathan had taken the $40,000 I gave years ago, invested over time, and turned it into this. And there was more. In the corner sat a separate file marked in red: documentation. I opened it and almost lost my breath. Inside were printed emails, text messages, even screenshots. The first line hit like a slap. "She just needs to hurry up and die and leave the pension. I'll find a legal way to get it." That text came from Brianna's number to Trent's more than a year ago. I shook, but kept reading. There were sections where Brianna discussed manipulating Nathan, making him believe I was a burden, pushing me to pay more even though the mortgage came straight from his salary. There were luxury purchase receipts matching the days she claimed she couldn't afford groceries. Each page twisted my stomach pain, and a rising anger. Nathan had known. He'd seen it all, and quietly gathered proof so one day I could protect myself. At the bottom was an old family photo, me and Nathan on his college graduation day, his face bright with pride. On the back he'd written, "Mom, you're the reason I got here. Never forget that." I pressed the photo to my chest, choked up. For years I'd thought my son had been pulled away by his wife's control. But deep down, Nathan had always stood with me. He just prepared for the worst. When I left the bank, the envelope and files were secure in my purse. Miss Peterson walked me out, eyes gentle. "Mrs. Hartley, I met Nathan a few times when he came in. He always mentioned you. I believe he loved you more than you know." I nodded, eyes wet, and whispered thanks. Outside, the midday light made me squint. The wind was cold, but I felt warm inside. On the drive back to the motel, my phone rang. Brianna. For a second I wanted to ignore it, but I answered. Her voice was sickly sweet. "Genevieve, are you busy today?" I think maybe we should sit down and talk about everything. I don't want the family to fall apart. I made roast chicken your favorite. I tightened my grip on the wheel and gave a thin smile. Sure, I'll come. I knew. She wasn't inviting me out of kindness. She'd heard about the box. Now she wanted to pry out whatever Nathan left. But this time, I wasn't coming empty-handed. I had truth, evidence, money. I had my son's quiet protection. That meeting would be our first face-off since the will reading, and this time I wouldn't just defend. I'd test her, so she'd see I was no longer the compliant mother-in-law. I drove slowly, sunlight flashing off the windshield, my lips pressed tight. Inside, I spoke to Nathan. Thank you, son. I found my weapon, and I'll use it at the right moment so you can rest, and the truth can see daylight. The lunch date with Brianna fell on a clear noon, sunlight slicing through my windshield so bright I had to pull the visor down. I drove my old car, emotions roiling. From the moment I left the bank, I knew her invitation wasn't about family, it was just another trap, but this time, I was ready. Brianna's house sat on a quiet suburban street. It was still the place I'd lived for 2 years, yet it now felt unsettlingly foreign. When I parked, the door opened. Brianna stood there in a pristine white dress, smiling warmly as if nothing had ever happened. "Genevieve, you're here. I'm really glad," she chirped, honey-sweet voice, eyes cold as ice. I nodded slightly, carrying a small bag. Inside was the gift I'd chosen on purpose, a framed photo of Nathan on his graduation day. I was sure Brianna had never seen it, because back then she hadn't yet entered my son's life. Inside, I hesitated. The dining room gleamed. A white cloth covered the table, a neat vase of red roses in the center. Fine, gold-rimmed china was set like a banquet. Roast chicken, salad, white wine, everything staged perfectly, like props for a performance. "Please sit, Mom," Brianna said, pulling out a chair like the devoted daughter-in-law. If I hadn't known her true face, I might have believed she wanted to make peace. I set the gift bag on the table and smiled. "I brought you something small, thought you should have it." Brianna tore the wrapping open. Seeing Nathan in his cap and gown, face glowing with pride, her expression softened only for a moment. The fake smile snapped back into place. "Beautiful picture." "Thank you, Mom," she said, setting the frame aside. I noticed she didn't handle it gently, just brushed it off like a prop she didn't need. Saturday. Brianna poured wine and handed me a glass. "To Nathan," she said, with staged emotion. I clinked lightly and took a small sip. Inside, I reminded myself, stay calm, observe, don't rush. Lunch slid by in small talk. Brianna talked about repairs the house needed and rising expenses. I knew she was setting the stage. I stayed quiet and let her tangle herself in her own sugary web. Finally, after a few fluffy stories, Brianna set down her utensils, propped her chin on her hand, and smirked. "Genevieve, I know you went to the bank. I'm not stupid." "So, what did you find in the box?" I looked up, playing dumb. "Oh, nothing much. Just a few old photos, some keepsakes." Nathan was sentimental like that. Brianna narrowed her eyes. I saw suspicion flicker, then she gave a thin smile. "Really? I think there must be something more valuable." Nathan wouldn't keep a whole safe deposit box for a few pictures. I shrugged, feigning indifference. Meanwhile, my hand quietly placed a black pen on the table next to the water glass. It wasn't a normal pen, it was the mini recorder I'd bought after the first time I captured her cruel words. A light press at the top, and the entire conversation would be saved. And I had just pressed it. Brianna poured herself more wine, took a long sip, then lowered her voice. "Genevieve, we're both adults. I'll be blunt. If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut. We both know Nathan left something, and it's better for everyone if we make a private deal. You'll have money to rent a place, and I won't have to drag this into court. Win-win." I sat still. looking straight into those glossy, fake eyes. For a moment, I saw the real face peeking out from under the makeup. That offer wasn't just greed, it was open contempt. I nodded slightly, my voice shaky, pretending to think. You really believe Nathan would want me to hide what he left? Brianna jumped in immediately. Don't bring up Nathan. He's dead. We have to be practical. If you're smart, you'll work with me. If not, you'll get nothing but a few meaningless photos. I bit my lip, bent to pick up my napkin, and hid a bitter smile. In my pocket, the pen recorder was capturing everything. If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut, was the second noose, tightening around Brianna's neck. Lunch dragged on a few more minutes under a quiet tension. Brianna kept painting a picture of mutual cooperation, and I just nodded, letting her talk. Now and then, I tossed in a clueless line, playing the out-of-touch mother-in-law who's easy to steer. I knew the more she thought she was winning, the more she'd reveal herself. When the meal ended, Brianna walked me to the door, still smiling. I hope you'll think this over seriously. I don't want tension with you. Family needs to stick together. I gripped her hand and looked her in the eye. Exactly. Family needs to stick together. And don't worry, I won't forget what you said today. I turned and left, my pocket heavy with the pen recorder. In my head, Brianna's syrupy but calculating voice echoed, If you cooperate, I'll give you a cut. Another piece of evidence, another puzzle piece in the picture I was quietly assembling. When the door closed behind me, I stepped into the sunlight, the breeze brushing my cheek. I took a deep breath. With every step now, I didn't feel alone. I had Nathan behind me, the truth in hand, and bit by bit, I was turning the table. After that staged lunch, I didn't rush to distance myself from Brianna. I knew to corner her, I needed one more face-to-face, one sharp blow to knock off the mask. I chose 3 days later, when Brianna called first, trying to sound warm. Genevieve, could you stop by the house? I want to show you some papers. Nathan left. Maybe we'll understand each other better. Her voice was sugary, but I could smell the scheme. I agreed immediately. I had my own plan. Brianna's living room gleamed, fresh flowers on the table, leather sofas polished. She wore a red dress, makeup carefully done like she was prepping for a high-profile meeting. I sat, set my purse beside me, folded my hands, and kept my expression calm. Thank you for coming, Brianna began with a half-smile. I think we need transparency to avoid misunderstandings. I don't want family tension. I waited a few seconds, then pulled a printed screenshot from my pocket. I set it gently on the table and slid it toward her. Brianna's eyes shifted from curious to stunned as she read the clear words, Parasite. If Nathan dies, I'm turning her room into a home gym like I promised. The text was sent from her phone to Trent. Her face went pale. Her lips quivered. This isn't mine. Someone faked it. I smirked slightly, my tone even. Really? Because I have the originals on the drive. Nathan kept timestamps, phone numbers, and images. Who do you think a court will believe? An elderly mother with no reason to fabricate, or a widow with plenty of motive and gain? The room grew heavy. Brianna's hand trembled as she reached to snatch the page, but I pulled it back. I stared straight at her without blinking. And there's more, I said, taking out a thick, clipped stack. I dropped it on the table with a thud that made her jump. I plan to hold this back, but maybe you need a reminder. These are your credit card statements. $15,000 spent the month Nathan died. High-end spa, New York hotel, designer clothes. And here, I flipped pages and pointed to a line, is the day you asked me to help cook for the funeral reception the same day your card ran nearly $3,000 for a dress. And this is what you call financial hardship? Brianna froze. Her eyes went wide, lips shaking, but no words came out. I leaned back, my voice lower but sharp. Nathan saw it all. My son didn't say much, but he quietly kept records. Every bill, every text, every snide remark you made behind my back. And now it's all here." Brianna clutched her chest, her face ashen like her mask had been ripped off. She stammered, "Genevieve, I was overwhelmed. I needed to blow off steam." I let out a dry laugh. "Blow off steam? With Nathan's money, with lies, by turning a widowed mother into a joke among your friends?" I didn't raise my voice, but each word hit the table like a hammer, driving her further down. Her fingers dug into her palms. I knew she was spiraling, and that's exactly what I wanted. I leaned in and lowered my voice. "The most interesting part is, I still haven't shown the heaviest evidence. What you've seen is only the surface. Nathan left plenty more enough to shred your reputation if I choose, but I'm not rushing. I want you to sit with it and understand the ledge you're standing on." The silence was so complete I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Brianna looked up, fear and hate tangled in her eyes. But I wasn't shaking anymore. I'd come too far to back down. I stood, straightened my coat, and spoke calmly. "Thanks for lunch the other day. And thanks for proving Nathan was right to believe his mother needed to prepare. Remember this, Brianna, I haven't made any of this public. But if you keep thinking about tossing me out, these papers will speak for me." I gathered everything into my bag and walked to the door. Before closing it, I turned back. "Oh, and remember, everything you said yesterday and today didn't disappear. It's in my hands. You decide how you want to be remembered." The door shut, leaving Brianna slumped in her fancy living room, face ashen. Outside, I drew in the cold air. The documents in my purse felt heavy like living proof. I knew the fight wasn't over, but with each step, I was flipping the script. Most of all, for the first time in years, I didn't feel cornered. A week later, an invitation from Brianna arrived. She called it a gathering to honor Nathan, just a small get-together for family and close friends. I held the card, feeling something off. The same woman who coldly kicked her mother-in-law out right after the funeral now wanted a memorial party? I knew immediately. This wasn't about Nathan. It was a stage for Brianna to keep playing the perfect widow. I decided to go, but this time, not empty-handed. In my purse, the documents and the pen recorder quiet weapons Nathan left me were ready. I knew the stage Brianna built would be the perfect place to strip off her mask. That evening, I arrived early. The house glowed with lights, white flowers lined the walkway, and scented candles filled the living room. On the long, lace-covered table were framed photos of Nathan, but almost all chosen by Brianna. Wedding shots, vacations, the two of them smiling. I noticed not a single photo of Nathan with me. Guests trickled in. I sat quietly in a corner, watching. Brianna wore a long black dress, hair in a sleek bun, makeup immaculate. She floated around the room with a wine glass, chatting up everyone. Her eyes watered, her voice trembled. Life is so empty without Nathan. He was my whole world. Family members nodded, some wiped tears, others patted her shoulder. I stayed silent, an outsider in the room. But inside, my heartbeat slowed, waiting for the right moment. Midway through, Brianna stood in the center and raised her glass. Her voice shook like she was holding back pain. "Thank you all for being here to remember my husband. Nathan was a wonderful man, and I only hope to live in a way worthy of his love." Applause filled the room. A few relatives whispered praise about her strength. I shivered, but I knew in seconds that admiration would turn to shock. I stood and spoke evenly. "Excuse me, I have something to share." All eyes swung to me. Brianna stiffened, then quickly smiled, her tone generous. "Oh, Genevieve, of course. I should say a few words. Everyone knows how much you loved Nathan." I walked slowly to the center, my hand on the pen recorder already switched on in my pocket. I scanned the room, then met Brianna's eyes. She gave a small nod to proceed. I set the pen on the table. A soft click sounded as I hit play. Brianna's voice filled the room, clear, cold, nothing like the weeping woman in front of them. She's just an extra expense. Once the funeral's done, I'm turning her room into a home gym. Don't worry, Nathan's too soft, he'll never push back. The room went dead silent. Relatives and friends froze. A few mouths fell open. Others stared at Brianna in disbelief. I heard the whispers ripple. My God, did she really say that? During the funeral? While Genevieve was grieving her son? Heartless. I stood still, saying nothing more. Their eyes said it all for me. Brianna's face flushed. Her lips trembled. She forced a laugh, hands up. This must be edited. Someone's trying to set me up. You have to believe me, I would never. But the family's eyes delivered the blow. An older aunt stepped forward, voice firm. Brianna, that's your voice. No one can fake that little bitter laugh. We heard it plain as day. A cousin shook his head and sighed. I always thought you were cold. But this? Nathan deserved better. Brianna looked around, trying to smile, but it shattered. She reached for her glass, but her hand shook so hard wine sloshed onto the table. I didn't add any more harsh words. I just looked at her for a long time, then turned to the family. I don't need to prove much. I just want everyone to know Nathan was never blind. He saw the truth, and he protected his mother in his own way. Today, I let Brianna's own voice expose her. The whole room went silent. People no longer looked at Brianna the same way. The praise was gone, replaced by cold, scrutinizing stares. Brianna tried to stand tall, but I clearly saw her shoulders shaking, her face drained of color. She was lost inside her own performance before an audience that no longer believed. I went back to my seat and set my hand on the purse heavy with documents. I knew I still had stronger blows to land. But right now, one strike was enough to make Brianna's perfect mask fall off in front of the whole family. That night, as I left the house, I heard the whispers behind me. Unbelievable. Someone like that had the nerve to fake crying. Now I understand why Nathan changed the will. I walked into the night wind, feeling lighter. For the first time in months, the pain of losing my son wasn't smothered by humiliation. Instead, I felt a quiet strength, the strength Nathan left me, so I could keep going and let the truth finally be seen. After that evening, the whole family atmosphere changed. Relatives and friends all looked at Brianna with caution and doubt. I knew her mask had fallen, but someone used to living by deceit wouldn't quit easily. And sure enough, 2 days later, on a drizzly evening, Brianna showed up at the door of the motel where I was staying. She wore a long coat, hair wet and clinging to her cheeks, still trying to look polished. When I opened the door, she stepped in immediately and sat down like she owned the place. Her eyes were tired, but her voice was honey-sweet. Genevieve, we need to talk. I don't want a war anymore. I know you have evidence. I won't deny it. But we all want peace. I'm proposing a deal. I looked at her without answering, sat on the bed, and waited to see how the show would go on. Brianna leaned toward me and lowered her voice. Let's split what's in the box, half and half. I don't need all of it. You keep your share, I keep mine. In return, you stay quiet. No more evidence, no making a scene with the family. Everything goes back to normal. That's the only way we both win. Hearing that, I wanted to laugh. Normal? After everything she'd done? But I didn't show it. I just nodded slightly, my voice trembling on purpose. Maybe you're right. I'm exhausted. But how do I know you'll keep your word? Right then, I took a neat stack of papers from the drawer. On top it said, Investment Cooperation Agreement. I placed it on the table and slid it toward Brianna. I don't need much. We just sign this. Harold drafted it so both sides commit. That way, no one can claim they were forced later. Brianna frowned and glanced over the papers. I knew she was suspicious, but greed won. Her eyes skimmed lines and relaxed when she saw vague phrases: investment, cooperation, commitment to shared responsibility, no claims. She looked up with a bitter little smile. "You're not that naive after all. Fine, I'll sign. I want this over." Her hand shook, holding the pen, but she signed in the end. A straight, bold signature. And the moment the ink dried, I knew the game was over, because in that cooperation agreement, every line was a trap. Harold had carefully woven in legal clauses. Brianna admitted spending $15,000 from the life insurance on personal use, acknowledged her insults and humiliation toward me, and agreed to withdraw any claims against Nathan's assets. In other words, it was a disguised confession, and Brianna had just signed it herself. I sat quietly for a few seconds, watching her fold the papers like she'd just bought a ticket to safety. Then I said softly, "You know, Nathan always thought ahead. He planned for everything. And maybe, today, you proved he wasn't wrong." Brianna froze, eyes wide as she realized she'd been cornered completely. But there was nothing she could do. It was all on paper, with her own signature. She jumped up, face white, voice cracking. You tricked me." I answered calmly, "No, Brianna. Your greed and contempt tricked you. I only handed you a pen rest you chose." Rain tapped the motel window. Brianna stood there a moment, then suddenly turned and left. The door slammed, leaving an oddly peaceful quiet. I stayed seated, running my hand over the freshly signed papers. Tears fell, but not from helplessness. They were the tears of a mother who had suffered loss and humiliation, and finally found her dignity again. That night I opened the window and let the night air in. I looked up at the murky sky and whispered, "Nathan, you did it. You're still protecting me even when you're not here. And I promise, from now on, I'll live without bowing my head." I knew it wasn't entirely over with Brianna, but with her written confession and the evidence I held, she couldn't touch me anymore. The game was finished, and for the first time, I was the one who won the match. After the night Brianna put her name on that fateful paper, I knew it was closed. But with someone who lives by schemes, I could never be careless. I needed a new start, a place where each morning I woke up wasn't haunted by my former daughter-in-law's cold stare. I started looking for a home, nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just a small apartment with enough light and quiet so my footsteps wouldn't be treated like noise. And then I found it a third-floor unit with windows facing the town park. Wide glass brought sunlight into the living room where I set an old moss-green armchair. From there, every morning I could watch other seniors walking their dogs, kids playing, and feel like I still belonged to a community. On moving day, I stood in the empty apartment, holding a small box of Nathan's keepsakes. I placed his graduation photo on the wooden shelf beside a lavender pot I'd grabbed from the shop downstairs. That alone warmed the room. I whispered, "Nathan, see? I have a new home. It's not big, but it's full of light. And this time, no one can take it from me." In the first week, I joined the Seniors Women's group at the church near the park. They met regularly, sometimes book reading, sometimes just chatting and knitting. I listened to their stories, and one day I shared mine. I didn't reveal every detail, but enough for someone to understand. Don't keep your eyes shut when you're humiliated. And don't believe patience will change someone cruel. My story, though painful, was a warning to women like me. Don't let yourself be erased in the name of family. Harold, the loyal attorney Nathan trusted, visited one afternoon. He brought the original paper Brianna signed. Setting it on the table, he looked at me and said, "If she bothers you again, we have a weapon. This document is strong enough for any court to shut Brianna down. You don't need to worry anymore." I smiled, for the first time feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. For weeks I'd been bracing for a nasty call or another threat, but my phone stayed quiet. No calls, no messages, She vanished into the shadows where people who've lost their credibility hide behind silence. Still, I stayed careful. One morning I sat at my small desk, opened my laptop, and plugged in a new USB drive. I transferred every copy of the evidence, recordings, screenshots of messages, and the credit card statements Harold had helped pull. I sealed the USB in a thick envelope and mailed it to a backup law office, Harold's close friend in Boston. If anything happened to me, everything would be released automatically. That was my justice insurance. The final trap so Brianna could never crawl back up. That evening I sat alone on my balcony watching the streetlights cast gold over the trees. No more fake sobbing, no more whispered contempt. Just a cool breeze, the smell of grass from the park, and kids' bright laughter. I took a long breath, closed my eyes, and let my heart rest after the storms. Nathan was gone, but what he left me wasn't just money or legal papers. It was faith that justice, slow as it may be, can still show up. And as long as we stand our ground and hold on to our dignity, no one can turn us into trash. I poured a hot cup of tea and raised it like touching an invisible promise. From now on, I'd live for myself, not as someone else's shadow, not as a burden in anyone's eyes. I'd live as a free woman, with a small, sunlit home and the belief that justice had been sown. Some mornings I wake in my little apartment and open the window to let the sun flood the room. On the table, Nathan's framed photo sits straight, his gentle smile reminding me, "Mom, you're never alone." I pour coffee, listen to sparrows chirp outside, and realize, finally, I can breathe like a normal person again. Justice doesn't always come from courtrooms or loud verdicts. Sometimes it happens quietly through evidence, signatures, and the persistence of a heart that refuses to break. I didn't need to publicly humiliate Brianna. I just needed her to fall into her own trap. And she did. Sometimes I wonder, if Nathan were still here, what would he think? Maybe he'd hug me tight and say, "Mom, you're stronger than I thought." I know the pain of losing him will never fully fade. But within that pain, I found strength. I stood up. I wouldn't let anyone define my worth or turn me into a shadow with their insults. Sometimes I stroll in the park and chat with a few ladies from the group. They listen wide-eyed, then nod. You did what many of us wouldn't dare. I don't see myself as a hero. I'm a mother, a widow, an older woman who knows silence can be more dangerous than confrontation. Every night before bed, I still check the backup USB, looking at the neatly stored files. I don't need to use them, but knowing they exist lets me sleep. It's not just justice insurance for me. It's a reminder that truth is stronger than lies if we hold it steady. Writing down this story, I'm not seeking pity. I want to leave a message for anyone whose pastor felt belittled or trampled. Don't ever think age or loneliness makes you weak. Don't be afraid to stand up. Sometimes a single piece of paper, a pen, or a tiny recorder is enough to turn your life around. I lost my son, but I didn't lose myself. That's why I can sit here and tell you this with calm conviction. Justice always finds its way. Before I end, I want to thank everyone who stayed with me to the very end of this story. Your presence wherever you are makes me feel less alone. Where are you listening from? Please share your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know how far my story has traveled. If this touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone you care about, and don't forget to subscribe so we can keep walking together through the next stories. Every comment, every view, every bit of empathy you've given is the greatest gift to me at my age. Wherever you are, may each of us find light, find justice, and most of all, find peace in our hearts.